Happy Wednesday morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Morning Jocks. I'm Conrad Van Order alongside John Saber, and we appreciate you making us a part of your morning each and every day right here on Jocks. So Damian Mitchell enjoying another day off. He'll be back with us tomorrow as we get closer and closer to the weekend, and of course another great slate of college football action. But appreciate Saber being a part of the show here for the first 3 days of the week. And we've got a lot to get to because it's Wednesday, which means it's officially time that we start turning our full attention onto the next week of the college football season, which will be week 10 of the season. And Alabama's going to be on bye week. We know Auburn, they're going to be hosting Kentucky this weekend. But there's a lot of very important games being played, not only obviously around the SEC, but also around some of the other conferences around the country. So we've got some fantastic games coming up this weekend. And as you know, we like to do this every Wednesdays. We like to start things off by telling you what you have to look forward to this weekend. And you can start scheduling around, what games you need to make sure that you're in that right spot, you're in that right location to take it all in. And again, we have a number of games. I have 9 games listed out on Saturday that are either ranked matchups or games involving, SEC teams that'll be probably one possession games based on what we've seen this year, and a couple of these going to have big implications on the college football playoff as well. So let's get started. What you have to look forward to this weekend in college football, and we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks now. But these 11 a.m. games we've been getting in the SEC have been so good lately. And we've really had an incredible stretch of these matchups. A lot of them have been ranked matchups, and this week is no different. And this one is potentially a college football playoff. What I have to imagine would be a college football playoff elimination game for one of these two programs. But that's going to be Vanderbilt at Texas. So number 9 Vanderbilt. They moved up one spot this week in the poll. They're going to go travel to Austin to take on the Longhorns. And you have to imagine, right, if Texas loses this one, they'll probably be out of the college football playoff conversation. They'll have 3 losses on the season. Similarly for Vanderbilt, right, if you're 8-1, so it'd be another ranked win back-to-back after what they did against Missouri last weekend. And then you throw in LSU, but the week before that. And so they would actually be on a little bit of a stretch, kind of like what we just saw with Alabama to a certain degree, if Vanderbilt can get the win here. So this is a massive game. I'm really, really excited for this one. Again, I think a lot of us would agree that Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt have been the better team this year. But is this a game where Texas kind of puts it all together? We also have to wait and see with Arch Manning and the fact that he got concussed in last week's game, what his availability might be for Saturday morning.
With this game, it feels like even though Arch may not be in that game, it's kind of interesting because Arch is going to be out and he was a runaway Heisman favorite. But this, if he would show out and or win the game, this is the game that would put Diego Pavia, if not in New York, at least on a lot of people's Heisman radar. Because I feel like for the most part, most everyone is just kind of gravitating towards best quarterback on best team. Mm-hmm. That's not to take anything away from Mendoza or Ty Simpson, but not that they haven't been dynamic or flashy, but in years past, when there's been a dynamic or flashy kind of quarterback and a good team, that's who people have gravitated to. And even though Pavia has kind of been that, he hasn't really had that, oh, okay, yeah, I see it, kind of a national stage kind of moment. And not that Texas is a world beater, at least hasn't really been so far this season, that Longhorn logo still means something. And given his pedestrian-looking numbers against Missouri, if he were to come out and have a spectacular showing heading into November, well, actually it would technically be November, but heading into the final month of the season, yeah, this is a really, really big game and one that I'm definitely excited to watch.
Yeah, it's a big one for Pavia, and I think you brought it up, which is, last week against Missouri, a lot of people, I guess I just saw over the weekend, more people say, well, why is not Diego Pavia maybe not getting more talk or hype in the Heisman race? And I think he's in the conversation, right? People are bringing his name up, but you go and look at what he did against a team like Missouri, and you go, okay, well, those are the kinds of numbers that again, if we're just comparing and contrasting, like I think a lot of us would say, I think you could argue Ty Simpson maybe had the worst game of the season, even when you go back and look at the Florida State game, potentially in what he did against South Carolina. Now he turned it on when he needed to and made some big plays. But even in a game like that, where you go, man, that was probably his worst game of the year. He threw for 250, 2 touchdowns, and no interception. He had the fumble, but no interceptions. And so, if you're Diego Pavia, right, can you continue to add on to those numbers? Because there's no right. It's the debate of, is the most valuable player the best player on the best team, or is it the player that if you took them off of their team would have the biggest negative impact, right? Because that's technically the most valuable, right? And I think
You would
we
think.
all agree that Diego Pavia would certainly fit that definition of it. But you're right in the sense that he doesn't quite have the numbers that a Ty Simpson or a Mendoza has, or some of the other guys there that are in the conversation. But if you get a win over Texas, like we talked about, that'll probably change a lot of things. All right, moving on into your Saturday at 2:30, you've got the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, which for some reason they don't like calling it that anymore, but that's a fantastic name for a rivalry. So in Jacksonville, Florida, Georgia, they're going to be taking on the Florida Gators. Georgia slightly over a touchdown favorite in this one. So again, people telling you that maybe they're expecting Florida to have a Texas-like performance in the sense of, that was the best that they've looked all year. Maybe this game against Georgia will have some of that as well. I mean, you go back last year and, DJ Lagway gets hurt in this game last year, but at that point, Florida was surging. It looked like maybe they were going to come back and actually pull off that upset over Georgia before he got hurt. So maybe a little bit of that magic returns this Saturday, but that game is going to be at 2:30. You got Mississippi State at Arkansas at 3 o'clock. Again, that's not going to steal any headlines, but it should just be a good SEC game. And right, both of them fighting for. So here's the fun stat of that game. So Mississippi State hasn't won an SEC game since 2023. The last SEC team they beat was Arkansas. Arkansas hasn't won an SEC game since last year. The last SEC team they beat was Mississippi State.
Whew.
So one of these teams is going to snap their losing streak in the SEC because they have to.
And not only that, whomever wins still keeps their bowl hopes alive.
Yes.
Arkansas sitting at 2-6, they lose this game. All right, they're officially done, but they're going to have to win out, which was going to seem kind of daunting. But if you can get this one, okay, maybe you can move forward because all you have left is LSU, Texas, and Missouri. So chances are you're not going, but this would still go a good bit of a long way. But if you're Mississippi State sitting at 4-4 and 0-4 in conference, and arguably should at least be 2-2, given the Tennessee and Texas teams you went to overtime.
Feels like Lebby needs this one.
Yeah. Not only that, if you weren't such an early coach, it feels a lot like Hugh Freeze. And listening to Lebby's press conference, it sounded so much like Hugh Freeze. He was like, we're doing the great things. Everything's right there. We're just so close. And I was like, that sounds awfully familiar. But I think State fans are okay to hear because they're like, okay, we can actually see a lot of this. There's, for whatever reason, we're falling apart when it matters the most. But okay, second-year coach, all right, well, I'm willing to cut you a little bit of slack. But it just feels like even though they're close, like – they're going to get it eventually, whereas I felt like with Auburn, they just haven't seemed to.
No, that's a good point. So, yeah, a lot on the line in that one, more so for, coaches and fan bases, right? Especially, and if you're Bobby Petrino and you think there's, any hope left of you getting that full-time job at Arkansas, you would certainly need to win this one because you didn't do yourself any favors by having 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter against Auburn on Saturday. That certainly didn't help you out. All right, it's 6 o'clock on ESPN. You've got South Carolina at Ole Miss. Maybe this is an interesting game, right? Maybe you get an Ole Miss team that coming off the Oklahoma win on the road is not quite as enthused. Maybe you get a South Carolina team that has a similar effort to what they did against Alabama. But Ole Miss had their scare against Washington State a couple of weeks ago. I think that maybe set some things straight for them, and I think for South Carolina, losing to Alabama the way you did when you essentially had that game sealed, or at least going to overtime in that game looked like a certainty as a worst-case scenario. That might be a tough one to come back from, having to go on the road playing another top 10 team where now you kind of have the mentality of, great, even if we have a lead, even if we play well, we're going to blow it potentially. So I think that one sets up well for Ole Miss. But we'll see what Shane Beamer can do if he can rally the troops there. And then at 6:30, you got a pair of games because you got Kentucky at Auburn, which we've already talked about some this week, and we'll dive in, do a deep dive on that game tomorrow, of course. But Auburn a 10.5-point favorite right now. If that's something that
Never thought I'd see that the way this season was going. At least not before the week before the Iron Bowl.
No. So yeah, I'll just you make of that what you will. That's a little bit of a tricky one there. But hey, would be a big opportunity for Auburn to come out there and beat somebody by 17, 21, something like that, and really kind of make the fan base feel a little bit more optimistic.
Second biggest spread in the conference this weekend.
Yeah, after Ole Miss, South Carolina. That's a great point. And then finally at 6:30 as well, you have I guess what some people would consider the marquee matchup of the weekend across college football, because this is a college football playoff elimination game. Now, both of these teams may end up not getting in, but you have 6-2 Oklahoma and 6-2 Tennessee in Neyland Stadium in Knoxville. Again, the loser of this game, you're going to be 6-3. Hard to imagine you're going to find a way to get into the college football playoff unless absolute chaos happens around, which very well may happen. But it certainly feels like this is a massive game for, again, an Oklahoma team that's reeling after the Ole Miss loss, a game that their head coach thought they should win and thought they were the better team. And then you have a Tennessee team that obviously, you've had those tough losses to Alabama and Georgia. So are you going to be able to get past an Oklahoma team that you beat last year, but is certainly better this year with John Mateer and that defense that's so incredible? So it's going to be a fun weekend of college football. Again, some big matchups going on around the SEC. There's a couple more going on outside of it. You got, again, Penn State, Ohio State. That's not really interesting anymore, though. USC at Nebraska. That could potentially be a big game. And, I mean, you look at, some 6-2 Big Ten teams that could potentially make a push here down the stretch. And then Cincinnati at Utah. That's a top 25 matchup there in the Big 12 that, again, you need to keep an eye on these, because if these teams these leagues become multiple team conferences in the playoff, then we might only get 4 SEC teams instead of 5.
And 2 games you need to keep an eye on as well. Both ACC games featuring ranked teams going on the road. Number 10, Miami, going to SMU. That's an 11 o'clock game on ESPN.
That's a good point, yep.
And Virginia going to Cal. I think that's at 2:30, 2:45 on ESPN2. As it stands right now, if the season were in today, or if they both went out, Virginia and Georgia Tech would be the ones in Charlotte for the ACC championship game, but Miami would be on the outside looking in. So even if Miami were to win out and they don't make Charlotte at 11-1, they're making the playoffs. So if you want more than, I think SEC is at least getting 3, most likely 4, but if you're wanting 5 or potentially more, you need the ACC to kind of go after themselves a little bit, and Miami losing to SMU would help. Virginia losing to Cal definitely would help. Mm-hmm. So you may need to become a Brian Harsin fan again, because he's the OC over at Cal. Never thought you'd feel or see that, but if you want multiple teams in the playoff, this is what you need.
Well, I don't want multiple ACC teams in if they don't deserve it. So I'm not going to root for Brian Harsin, and I know a lot of other people won't either. But I mean, hey, Virginia. They came a couple feet away from getting upset by Chapel Hill last weekend.
Did, yes.
So I think that Cal and Brian Harsin certainly have an opportunity to do some magic.
Stanford was in
weekend.
that game early on.
Yep.
And then, Miami was just like,
I was about to say, Miami slaughtered them in the second half,
like,
but
it's raining. Oh, okay. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, it was ugly at first though, but they did what good teams do at the end. So that's your college football weekend coming up. Again, a lot of games to get into. We'll take a deep dive into more of those tomorrow. And of course, on Friday, me and Damien will deliver our picks for the weekend for you guys. So let's carry on the college football conversation. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but what's the latest in the Heisman race? Did a close call against South Carolina? Did that knock Ty Simpson down a couple of pegs? Where does Diego Pavia sit right now? Who are some dark horses still that could make a surge here in the final month of the season? We'll give you an updated look at the Heisman Trophy race and take a look at some other things around the world of college football. That's all coming up next right here on Morning Jocks. Welcome back into Morning Jocks here on your Wednesday. Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you until 7 o'clock when we will hand you off to McElroy and Kublick in the morning. Going to get into the Heisman Trophy race in college football here coming up in just a moment. But first, let's tell you about our friends over at Train, because we're in the thick of football season right now. And as the season moves along, you know that's going to mean changes in the weather. So protect your HVAC system with a checkup from a Train comfort specialist today, so that when the cold weather hits, you'll have peace of mind that you're protected by America's most reliable and trusted brand. Go find a comfort specialist near you today online at train.com. And if you've looked at the weather, once this nasty rain gets out of here, it is going to get real chilly over the next couple of days.
Heck yeah, the way it should be.
So yeah, keep that in mind. And I know some of you probably going to be turning on your heaters for the first time coming up here in the next couple of days. All right, let's get on to the Heisman Trophy conversation. We'll start there, and then we'll do some other housekeeping around the world of sports. So I saw this last night because the latest odds had come out from BetMGM for the Heisman Trophy in 2025. And so we'll start off at the bottom, the guys that are still hanging on into the conversation as it stands right now, and then work ourselves up. So as it stands right now, at plus 4,000 to win the Heisman Trophy, you've got a pair of quarterbacks. You've got C.J. Carr from Notre Dame, as well as Dante Moore from Oregon. So Dante Moore, he's taken a little bit of a tumble there since that loss to Indiana. And, the thing with Oregon is I don't know if they have the schedule in terms of, regardless of how well he plays, because he's played at a very high level, it's just he's not going to have those marquee matchups to really go and show out and have a big moment, it feels like, to get back in this conversation. Because he's somebody that before that Indiana game, I mean, he was right up there with Mendoza and Ty Simpson and the others atop the leaderboard, but he's now at plus 4,000 with the Notre Dame quarterback as well. All right, plus 3,000, God's gift of football, the greatest human being to ever play the game of football ever. Jeremiah Smith, the wide receiver at Ohio State. Coming in slightly ahead of the greatest college football player of all time is Haynes King, the Georgia Tech quarterback, at plus 2,500. And I'll tell you, that's the one where, if I had to sprinkle a little something on one of these guys that had, wasn't, in the top 3 or 4 of the odds, I mean, Haynes King right now, if they go 12-0, they beat Georgia, I would think that he would have a spectacular claim, especially if some of these other guys end up tripping up somewhere along the way. So Haynes King is plus 2,500.
Or even losing to Georgia, but in a shootout.
Like last year.
Yeah.
Something like that. Put up big numbers. Slightly ahead of Haynes King at plus 2,000 is Trinidad Chambliss, the Ole Miss quarterback there, who's had some big performances. I thought he played well against Georgia in the loss as well. And so he's going to have got a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way for Ole Miss. But again, certainly if you're 11-1 and leading your team to Atlanta in an SEC championship, you're going to be in the conversation. Plus 1,800 is Jeremiah Love, the best running back in college football. I know some people might argue Ahmad Hardy, but I think after the last couple of weeks, we can say Jeremiah Love, probably the most talented, probably the one that will go first in the NFL draft. He's plus 1,800 there for Notre Dame. And then a plus 1,500, we have Gunnar Stockton, the Georgia quarterback, slightly ahead of Jeremiah Love. All right, now for the top 5. These guys all have under plus 1,000 odds. These are, I guess, what you would consider essentially your Heisman finalist as it stands right now. So number 5, we talked about him earlier, Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback. He is plus 800. And, Saber brought up a good point about the Texas game this week, right? You show out on that one, you get a win, you put up some nice numbers, you're probably going to see yourself climbing up this chart and this odds list for next week. So Diego Pavia comes in at number 5. Number 4, Marcel Reed, the outstanding quarterback there for Texas A&M. He is plus 550 to win the Heisman Trophy right now, has Texas A&M undefeated on the season. And then in the top 3, at plus 400, Julian Sayin, the Ohio State quarterback, which it's weird to say this, but look, I know there's some people that are just going to hate him because he left Alabama and went to Ohio State. But I feel like he's almost underrated a little bit this year because Ohio State's been so good that we really haven't talked about them because they're just the defending national champions. They're undefeated. They're ranked number 1. I feel like he hasn't kind of gotten the credit or the shine. And part of that is Ohio State hasn't played, some of these marquee matchups that, we've seen from SEC teams, but Julian Sain has been fantastic for them.
And I think a good number of people, maybe rightly or wrongly, are crediting a lot of that to Jeremiah Smith.
True.
Maybe a little bit of the Justin Jefferson at Minnesota, whoever your quarterback is. Of course, he's going to look good. So I don't think it's all that, but I think it's a good bit of that.
I think that's certainly why he is behind these other two guys. And so if you were worried that Ty Simpson, after the performance against South Carolina, was going to take a tumble down the Heisman list, have no fear, because as it stands right now, he is still tied as the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy at plus 325 with Fernando Mendoza. So no surprise there that those two guys, I mean, again, unless one of those teams trips up between now and a potential conference championship game appearance, I find it hard to believe that it's not going to be one of those two guys. But there is still a good bit of football left for somebody to impress or somebody to, have a really bad game. Who knows? Ty Simpson could go out and against Oklahoma have a Carson Beck game and throw 4 interceptions and lose a game, and then we're not even talking about him because, as you heard, Carson Beck wasn't even on that list after the Louisville game. So, anything could happen with these guys, but as it stands right now, Mendoza and Ty Simpson still your leaders in the clubhouse for some hardware.
For all of them, I think I would – I don't know if he would fully win it, but I think the one I would bet on, at least potentially moving up, would be Diego because
he's got opportunities.
He's got probably the biggest stages to do it with Texas and yes, Auburn and Kentucky, but then closing out at Tennessee. I think the thing that's going to potentially hurt him is not playing on Conference Championship Saturday. Yeah. But I think there may be enough, especially if he does pretty well in Texas and Tennessee, both of which would be on the road because while, yes, Alabama has LSU and Oklahoma, and yes, at Auburn too, those, especially by the time Alabama gets to Oklahoma, if they have one, if not, I guess one more loss because they're off, but would they still be ranked at that time? They may not be, so it may not look as good. LSU's already lost their coach. And the same with Mendoza because I think they have Maryland, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Purdue, so probably not a ranked opponent ahead of that. And granted, yes, they'll have an opportunity in conference championship games, but I think there may be enough because, and this is no offense to them, they don't have the presence about them. I could see this being like an RG3 campaign in that RG3 was obviously a Heisman Trophy winner and a very good quarterback, but what he was doing with a team that was Baylor that was no one really expected much out of. And people kind of got surprised off Vanderbilt last year, but now it's like, okay, well, they'll probably fall back to earth a little bit. No, they're in the top 10 and barring a major setback, like they're making the playoff. And it's really because of this guy. So it could be almost a career achievement. So I think right now I might put my money on Diego Pavia.
It certainly wouldn't be, the worst bet that you could make. And he's, as you listed out, he's going to have opportunities to continue to impress. And certainly, again, if one of the people ahead of him slips up, don't be surprised if Diego Pavia is there in New York at the end of the day.
And I think another reason potentially why is if both Mendoza and Simpson are both 13-0, like what's separating them? Because I think both people could look at them like, well, they're both quarterbacks in red, 13-0. Like as great as that is, like why would I vote for one over the other? Okay, yes, maybe Ty did it in stiffer competition, but Mendoza put up better numbers.
And I also think the thing that would work in Pavia's favor, right, is if Vanderbilt does make the playoff, is I think there's a lot of people that until that actually happens, they're not going to take Vanderbilt's. Like, that would be the reality moment for everybody of, oh, they're actually in the playoff. Like, they're actually really good. And he would start to get more credit for that season as opposed to right now. I think a lot of people are still, oh, okay, it's fun. Yeah, we'll entertain it. But they're not actually going to be in the playoff, right?
Beating Texas will go a long way. Now, again, they lose this week, and all of a sudden that goes out the window. However, they lose this one, but still, I think they can't afford a loss. I think it's really this one. I think if they beat Texas but lose to Tennessee, then I think they're going to have an issue. But that's for a discussion down the line because I still think Diego is at least going to end up in New York, if not hoisted.
And I think that they're going to beat Texas this weekend. So, but again, that's why they have to play the games, and we'll see how that plays out on Saturday there in Austin, Texas. So that's the Heisman Trophy race, the conversation, what's going on there with Alabama's Ty Simpson, with Indiana's Fernando Mendoza, Diego Pavia, Julian Sain, and many, many others. But want to do something a little different now. Coming up, I want to take a look back again. We're in week 10 of the college football season. Let's find some positivity for these two programs. Both Alabama and Auburn get wins last weekend. Who have been the three best players, in your opinion, this year for both Alabama and Auburn? So we've come up with our own list. We just want to have a conversation. Who have been the most impressive players for you, whether you're an Alabama fan, Auburn fan, whatever it is, your top three players for your team this season so far? We'll unveil those and hear your picks as well next here on Jocks. 6:33. Welcome back into Morning Jocks here on a rainy Wednesday morning. Hope you're stay safe out there on the road this morning to school, work, wherever you may be headed. And of course, we always appreciate you tuning us in here on Jocks each and every morning because we are your home for college football and everything else going on in the sports world. But if you're just now joining us, we're going to mix it up a little bit. And so, what I decided to do today is I have made a list, and Saber has some thoughts as well on the top 3 players so far this season for both Alabama and Auburn. So we're kind of entering the final month of the season. It'll be November here on Saturday as some of these games are kicking off. So I thought it'd be a good time to look back and just go, okay, there's certainly areas for both teams to improve. There are players that have disappointed on both teams, but that goes for every team in the country, right? But what are the guys, who are the 3 that have shined the most, who have shined the brightest for both of these teams, and highlight the best of what both Alabama and Auburn have had to offer so far this season. So we'll start off with the Alabama Crimson Tide, as some of you have already chimed in with your list for Alabama on the Courtesy GMC text line, 205-834-9450, if you want to get in on the conversation as well. I think the one for Alabama, I think there's 2 very easy selections, and then I think maybe for a third you could go a couple of different ways. But I think we would all agree at the top of the list would be, I would put Ty Simpson and Jeremy Bernard as like a 1A and 1B kind of thing.
Okay.
I think Ty Simpson clearly, right, he's quarterback. He's in the Heisman Trophy conversation. He's arguably the best quarterback in college football right now. It speaks for itself. I don't think I need to sit here and tell you why Ty Simpson has been one of the 3 best players for Alabama this season. But I do think the fact that he is as good as he is and has essentially seemingly matured so quickly and gotten better at such a rapid pace, it really has been a nice surprise, I think, to a majority of the fan base. I know some people out there will say, I saw this coming all along, and I guess you can say that. Kudos to you, but I don't think any of us thought that Ty Simpson would actually be arguably the best quarterback in college football, and we'd be saying that halfway through this season, but here we are. So I think Ty Simpson absolutely deserves to be on the list. And then I think we would all agree for Jeremy, right? He's been, if you had to pick a model of consistency for this team, he's been that guy. He's been a leader both on and off the field. He's done it not only, with his actions, with his body language, but with his performances on the field. So, I mean, just think about this. So Jeremy Bernard, he is the leader right now in receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and he's tied for the lead in rushing touchdowns on the Alabama offense. He's truly done it all. When Ryan Williams has been dropping passes, Isaiah Horton took a little while to get going early on. Now maybe he's a little banged up. Latsier Brooks misses the last game. The one consistent through it all has been Jeremy Bernard on that offense.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Bernard is the definite number 1. I think Ty Simpson is worthy of inclusion on this list as well. And I know it's sometimes easy to
He's the quarterback, so he's going to get more credit. Yeah.
I mean, we just, the last time we talked about the Heisman race, and the ones that are at the top, the 2 are because they're the quarterbacks of the not number 1 and 2, but the 2 best teams seemingly in college football right now. But what Ty Simpson has done, and really to surpass our expectations of it, because while like you said, there may have been some people that thought, oh, I always thought this. You didn't see him playing at a level that would put him in New York.
No.
You saw him, he's like, okay, if everything else comes together and he's at bare minimum a game manager, okay, yeah, we'll definitely make the playoff and should be able to make some noise. But he's proven himself way beyond that, and that has definitely helped out this team when they really needed it a couple of times this season. So, yeah, those 2 are definitely on the list. I do think Jeremy should be number 1 because of everything that he's done. But, yes, those 2 are definitely on the list for the top 3 players that Alabama has had this year.
Yeah, if you want to have Jeremy number 1 definitively, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He's been fantastic. And then the third one for me, I think there's a couple guys you could go. And I think basically, especially if you look at the last couple of games, some people might throw out like a Yanze Pierre, somebody that's really come along here late. But I went Bray Hubbard. I think that defensively, again, outside of the Florida State game where he was loafing and it wasn't great, you've absolutely seen him tear it up. So, I mean, he's tied for the league lead in interceptions. He's got 3 picks. He's got the second most tackles on the team there for Alabama. I think if you had to pick one defensive player, I think it has to be Bray Hubbard.
Yeah, this is when we talked about doing this subject, I thought, I'll put my 3. I was like, honestly, we'll probably end up having the same 3, so I'm going to do my best to maybe add someone else in, and honestly, I can't. I do think those are the best 3. Yeah, you could make an argument for a couple of other defensive players, but for the plays that Bray made, especially at the times that he made them, yeah, he's definitely on this list. I don't know if he's the best overall defensive player, but he's been the best player in Alabama in 2025. It's definitely that they've needed.
Yes.
especially at key times. Yeah.
Yes. It feels like whenever you need somebody to go and make a big hit or make a big play. I know you've got Lawson did that last game, but it feels like Bray Hubbard's just been all over the field this year. So I think he certainly deserves to get the nod there as the defensive player for Alabama. All right, so that was mine. Jeremy Bernard, Ty Simpson, Bray Hubbard. A lot of agreement there, and some of you chiming in on the text line. A number of you, have the exact same three of Ty Simpson, Jeremy, and Bray Hubbard. Ronnie threw in Isaiah Horton over Bray Hubbard. Isaiah Horton with 5 touchdown catches this year has certainly come through big in some opportunities. There's no doubt about it. So, I think you can kind of split some hairs on a couple, but I think everybody would probably have Ty Simpson and Jeremy Bernard at the least in their top 3. All right, let's look at the Auburn Tigers now. Flip the page to the other team, the other side of the state here. And I think the Auburn one is honestly, again, I think there's some wiggle room here, but I think there's 2 guys that are definitively there on the list. And I think the number 1 player is obvious, and it's Xavier Atkins.
Oh, clearly,
I don't think that's
Yeah.
a surprise to anybody. I mean, he's got 7 sacks on the season, which leads the team. That's second in the SEC right now. He's second in total tackles in the SEC. He leads Auburn, but second in the league in total tackles with 61. And again, just like I was talking about with Bray Hubbard, right? I know he plays a different position, but this is a guy that it feels like every single time a tackle's made on the field for the Auburn defense, he's in there somehow, right? He may not have been leading the charge, but he's going to be there to help finish the play in some regard. And so he's been fantastic. I mean, he was a monster against Arkansas this past weekend. I mean, his name got called, felt like every other defensive snap for the Auburn Tigers. So I think he's clearly been the best player on the field for Auburn so far this year, and certainly the best part of the defense, which has carried this Auburn team up to this point. I also think Jeremiah Cobb has to be on there. Jeremiah Cobb, very sneaky if you're not paying attention. He's second in the SEC in rushing yards now. Ahmad Hardy still in the lead there by a good margin, but he's second in the SEC in rushing. He's averaging over 6 yards a carry. He's got 4 touchdowns on the season. Again, we saw what he did against Arkansas this past weekend, and when you just look at that room and the situation with Damari where, he got hurt early on in the season, then obviously he stepped away from the team and he's no longer there. Darrell Robinson just now getting back, Omar Mabson, a freshman, getting some time there. So Jeremiah Cobb really had to be the stability in that room this year, and he's done a fantastic job. And he's proven to be one of the best running backs in the conference so far this season. Now, when you get to the third one, I think this is where we're kind of splitting hairs. I know a lot of people will probably say Cam Coleman. And I think, yes, if we're talking about who the most talented player on the team is for Auburn, it's Cam Coleman. But I think in terms of what you've actually gotten from them production-wise this year, it's not his fault. It's more so just the passing game in general. I went Keldrick Falk. Again, I think you could go a bunch of different ways here. He kind of fits that same mold of Cam Coleman of he's going to be a first-round pick. He very well may be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft coming up next April. He's got a pair of sacks for Auburn. But again, he's just one of those guys that him being on the field makes other players able to go and make plays because of how much you have to account for a guy like Keldrick Falk being out there. So that would be my third pick there for Auburn. So again, I went Xavier Atkins. I think he's clearly number 1. I think Jeremiah Cobb has been the best player on the offense, certainly. And then I put Keldrick Falk there as the third best player for Auburn so far this season. So what do you disagree with that at all, Saber?
No, I think we're splitting hairs for the third one. Cobb and Atkins are clearly 1 and 2. Maybe Keon Crawford. Maybe kind of want to put in there.
Yep. Worth a mention.
Had he not had the Missouri mess ups, I know he's not really talked about a lot on Mac and Q being kickers, but Alex McPherson, I mean,
I considered him
at
as
that
well.
point.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only real consistent offensive threat that Auburn has had. Again, he's 12-15 for the year, but the only misses he had were in that Missouri game. And granted, yes, those were fairly big misses, but that's it. Everything else, especially this last one going 6 for 6.
I mean, without him, you might not win that game against
Probably
Arkansas.
not at all. So I think there's some warranted discussion in that, but no, I think those 3 are the 3. And if this were a report and we were submitting it, I'd feel fairly solid that we at least get a B+.
Yeah. I think there's The top two are clear cut, but see, like Matt just texted in here on the courtesy GMC text line, and this is another person that I considered. And again, recency bias, absolutely, he deserves to be in there because he was just as big a part of that win last week as Alex McPherson was. That's Rashawn Pleasant. And with him, you factor in, all right, he's got the pick six now. He's made some big plays this year. He got a couple of turnovers actually in that Arkansas game the other night. But what he adds on special teams as well, I think he certainly belongs to get a mention in that conversation as well. So again, we're kind of splitting hairs on some of these guys. I think there's two clear-cut ones for both Alabama and Auburn, and then that third one, you can kind of take some liberties with what your perspective is or what you value the most on these teams so far this year. But we'd love to hear more from you because more of your list coming in on the courtesy GMC text line 205-834-9450. Your top three players for both Alabama and Auburn so far this season. You can send those in. We'll give our thoughts and read yours next right here on Morning Jocks. Welcome back into Morning Jocks. Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you until 7 o'clock when we'll hand you off to McElroy and Kublik in the morning as we just went through the top three players, in our opinions at least, for Alabama and Auburn so far this season. Again, this isn't who's going to be the highest draft pick one day or who makes the most NIL money. It's just based on the performance you've seen on the field this season. Who are the three guys that have stood out the most to you? And we've gotten some of you chiming in on that on the courtesy GMC text line, which is where we will go now. So this person, they say Ty Simpson, Jeremy Bernard, which we discussed. Pretty much everyone for Alabama is probably going to have those two guys. But he also throws in Parker Brailsford there on the offensive line. Certainly, Parker Brailsford has been good in the season and a half plus, I guess, that he's been in Tuscaloosa. So I don't hate that. If you want to go somebody on the offensive line there for help and protect Ty Simpson. See, this one comes in, and they just say my top three for Alabama is not players. It's all Ryan Grubb. No doubt about it.
Okay.
Ryan Grubb hanging out with John Gruden yesterday, if anybody saw that. Him and Nick Sheridan going and visiting with John Gruden in the bye week to, I guess, talk some football and pick his brain a little bit. But, Ryan Grubb's been fantastic for Alabama. There's no doubt about it. In the big moments when they've needed fantastic play calls, you go back to the 2-point conversion last week, things like that. He has certainly been there. Look at the Jeremy Bernard touchdown run there at the end of the game as well. I think there's some great examples of that all around it. Let's see. We've got another one. Ty Simpson, Jeremy Bernard, Bray Hubbard. I think a lot of people are going to go there. A lot of people throwing out, let's see, Xavier Atkins, Cam Coleman, Jeremiah Cobb from Auburn. That's Deuce who chimes in with that one. And again, look, if you want to put Cam Coleman in there, I have no problem with that. I think we all agree that Cam Coleman is one of the most talented players, and it's, the numbers that he's put up are not because of a lack of trying. It's just, he hasn't had somebody that can get him the football as frequently as necessary. See, this one comes in. It says, my vote goes for Damani Jackson. He's figured out a way to work part-time and get paid full-time. That's a good text right there. And I'll tell you what, I'm glad that he's working part-time right now because that's not a guy I want to see on the field for 50-plus snaps a game right now.
Probably not.
Defensively speaking. He has been rough at times. Let's see. We've got John Mack chiming in, who I'm sure gave us his list of his three favorite Alabama and Auburn players this year. But instead, he says, the Fighting Texas Aggies aren't playing this weekend, so it'll be a letdown for the college football sport. We will let all the poverty programs fight it out amongst yourselves. He then adds, the best quarterback in college football, I can't stop laughing when we were talking about the Heisman stuff with Ty Simpson, I imagine. He says, my Aggies have three wide receivers better than Jeremy Bernard. So he's openly acknowledging, in his opinion, that Texas A&M has better receivers than Alabama, which wouldn't that mean that we should give Ty Simpson more credit because he's been better than Marcel Reed with worse talent, according to John Mack?
That's what happens when you're in a cult. You all of a sudden drink some Kool-Aid and you're only thinking one way. Whoop!
Let's see. Yeah, and he says, why are we talking about the top three players for Alabama and Auburn when they're not even ranked in the top three teams in college football? I will just say this, and I have become privy to this over the last week or so. Texas A&M fans and Indiana fans are easily the two most obnoxious fan bases in college football right now because while they are both having great seasons, they have never won anything of worth in the fan base's lifetimes, and yet they are going around talking like they are the kings of college football and like everybody needs to bow down to them, which, again, you're having fantastic seasons. We will see if that leads you to a national championship at the end of the day. But man, Texas A&M fans and Indiana fans are just they're the worst. I'm sorry, they're the worst, and they know that they are. And the reason that they have to act like this is because they haven't ever won anything, and they're very sad people.
Be kind of a boring show if we talked about Ohio State football and Indiana football here all the time.
Oh my God, Ohio State beat Rutgers by 26 again. Shocker.
Would you have listened or do we have to switch it to at the top three every single year?
Yeah,
because. Great kudos to Indiana for doing what they're doing this year. And yes, they were darling last year. They weren't in the top three last year, so we wouldn't have talked about them last year or ever for that matter.
No, we wouldn't have. But the good thing is, right, all of this will take care of itself, and the games will be played, and we will find out who is ultimately supreme at the end of the year. But yeah, I started to piece that together over the last couple of days on social media of just, I'm looking at these comments from people on social media and I'm like, all right, let me go look at their bio, who they fans. Like, Indiana fan? I didn't even know Indiana fans cared like this, and now they're insufferable.
The college
Absolutely
football
insufferable.
version of The Summer I Turned Pretty.
Thank you. I had to watch that show with my wife, and it sucked. That show's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Don chimes in. He says, did y'all see what Walker Kessler did last night in the NBA? No, I didn't. I guess he had a good game there for the Jazz.
I'm still recovering from that damn Dodgers game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Dodgers fall to the Blue Jays last night, so that series tied up at 2 now as they head to Game 5 there in the World Series.
It's like Sidney Sweeney distracted him.
And someone says, Alabama and Ty Simpson can't go 13-0 because they lost to FSU. Yes, that is true. But he says that game does feel like a year ago. Yes, it certainly does. Appreciate all of you joining us. We're back tomorrow at 6 a.m. Mac and Cube. Those guys are up next.